a real scary situation that happened to you. When I was 20 years old, I moved to a new state to settle in a house by myself. I lived in a building with many floors, and I lived on the 18th floor in room 113. I had a very annoying neighbor. Every day I heard his children screaming, and I thought he was a responsible father. That's what I thought. One day I decided to go and talk to him. He came out to me. He smelled bad and looked disgusting. I covered my nose and tried to speak calmly. He said he would stop the noise. 3 weeks passed and the noise didn't stop, so I went to tell the building owner about this neighbor. What shocked me was that the neighbor's room, maybe 114, had been locked and abandoned for 5 years because of a woman who killed her husband and children. And the spirits of the children and husband inhabited the apartment. I almost died of terror, so I went back to my parents' house. We took care of an Airbnb in Delhi. What we found there still haunts me. A week ago, a close friend of ours had a family emergency and had to fly to London. Before leaving, he offered us a choice: look after his Airbnb in the Andamans or the one in Delhi. Since we were already living in Delhi, the choice was easy. A week-long paid staycation in a posh Delhi Airbnb? Yes, please. We arrived the next morning with our luggage, buzzing with excitement. The place was beautiful colonial-style architecture, full of sunlight and vintage charm. Our friend had arranged for a cook and gardener to assist us, and even told us to enjoy the place like a holiday home. Everything was perfect. That night we lit candles, cooked together, and ended up tangled in each other's arms under soft linen sheets. But in the middle of the night, I felt something watching us. A strange, silent presence. I brushed it off. Maybe I was just imagining things in a new house. There was something about that house. It didn't feel haunted. It just felt empty in a way I can't explain. Like the walls were hollowed out by grief. The air was heavy, dry, and cold, despite it being 40 degrees Celsius outside. At night, no matter how much we cuddled under the blankets, our skin stayed cold. My breath fogged up in the mirror. My boyfriend said his joints ached like the house was draining the warmth out of our bones. On day 3, the doorbell rang. A group of friends stood outside, claiming they had booked the place through some website we'd never heard of. I checked our friend's system, no booking, but they had receipts, real ones. We let them in. That was the mistake. That night, one of them screamed in their sleep. Not a normal nightmare scream, a guttural one. We rushed to check, but when we opened their room, they were gone. Their clothes, bags, phones, all still there. But they weren't. We called our friend. No answer. The cook wouldn't return our calls either. The gardener's number said no longer in service. Time got weird. Me and my boyfriend's phone showed different date and time. I don't remember leaving. I only remember waking up in my apartment 3 days later shivering. My fingernails were blue. My boyfriend was in bed but didn't speak for 12 hours. Just stared at the ceiling, eyes wide, unblinking. We checked with our friend. He swore he hadn't called us in weeks. Said the Delhi property had been demolished 5 years ago after a fire broke out and killed an entire group of guests. We still get emails from that other website asking us to please leave a review of your stay. Sometimes, late at night, we hear footsteps outside the apartment door and whispering sound that says, "Stay!" Sometimes when I call my parents' landline phone, a strange woman answers the phone and says, "Hello." This has been happening for as long as I can remember. I am 30, so a few decades at least. My parents' house was built in the 50s. It was previously owned by an older woman. IDK if she died in the house or not. Our neighbor's house was haunted, according to the adults who live there. I'm unsure of the specifics, but they were certain about that. I will try and explain this clearly. This is the situation that happens once every few months. Sometimes just a few times. Year. From my cell phone, I call my parents' landline phone. After a few rings, the line opens and a woman's voice says, "Hello." It sounds like an old-fashioned woman's voice. I say, "Hello, who is this?" or some other similar response. There is no answer. The line remains open until I hang up. If I call back, I don't hear the woman again. Every time this happens, the hello is exactly the same. The voice hasn't aged in decades. Does this make sense? I posted in /ghosts and I confused everyone. My mom said this is just normal. She says it's the woman who lived there before. Could that be true?
Hi, I'm not used to posting, but I would like to know other people's opinions. Let me give you some context. I'm Mexican, and in 2023, I had the opportunity to go on a tour of the Islas Marias, better known as the Mexican Alcatraz, as this place was a prison for 100 years. I took this photo during the tour of Laguna del Toro prison, a maximum security prison that closed in 2015. At the time, I didn't pay attention to the photos I took on the tour until a few days ago when I decided to look at them again on a whim and found this in this photo. What do you think it is? Personally, seeing that thing gives me the creeps. I feel like it's smiling, but not in a kind way, more like an evil one.
First time posting anything on Reddit, but I'm kind of desperate for answers. Everyone in my family thinks I'm crazy and they laugh at me. It all started about 5 years ago. My wife and I moved into a 3-bed 2-bath trailer. A couple of months after we moved in, I jolted awake. It felt like I was being watched in my sleep. I could feel another presence in the room. To my horror, I realized I was right. There was a black mass hovering over my daughter's bed. It was clinging to the ceiling, just watching us sleep. I couldn't speak, it was hard to move. I was finally able to wake my wife up, but I couldn't tell her what was wrong. I just kept pointing the entity that I was seeing, but she saw nothing. I finally got my voice after struggling for what seemed like ages, and told her what was happening. She saw nothing, heard nothing, told me to go back to sleep. I told myself it was just a bad dream. As time went on, I would hear footsteps. Doors opened and closed on their own. Eventually, we had another daughter, and the girls all slept in a bed, and I couldn't take sleeping in the bed with so many people, so I started sleeping in the spare bedroom. When I did, things got worse. Whatever this thing is, it got more bold. It started pulling my hair, ripping the blanket off me at night. I started having the most horrible nightmares of mass murder, bodies contorted, burning babies, people screaming at me by name for help. Dreams I would never dare tell my family about. This past week has been the worst. I haven't slept for days. Every time I get to sleep, I have one of these horrific nightmares. Or I waken up because I can't breathe. Or I wake up and can't move. I woke up this morning to something whispering in my ear. A woman's voice, but didn't sound human. A few days ago, I woke up paralyzed and couldn't move. I could move my eyes, but not my body. I looked over to the door to the room, and there it was. Had to be at least 6 feet 6 inches tall. No eyes or discernible features, just the outline of a person, I guess you could call it. I just need to know I'm not crazy, and that other people have these things happen to them as well.
When I moved into the international student apartment during my 2 years abroad, I expected culture shock, maybe some homesickness. I didn't expect ghosts. Everything began when one of my roommates, who lived alone in a 2-bedroom, casually mentioned seeing the shadow of another person at night. She kept telling me it looked like a person lying on the other bed, breathing, sleeping. I didn't think much of it then, but the weirdness didn't stop there. During one of our evening get-togethers, a guy from another room suddenly screamed, startling all of us. He was pale and visibly shaken, claiming he had just seen a girl with long dark hair peeking around the corner of my roommate's room. More stories followed by many different people who had visited us, whispers of breathing in empty rooms, footsteps in the kitchen when no one was there. Some weeks later, the girl I shared a room with asked me one morning, "Did you hear that last night?" She claimed she had heard breathing, some kind of snoring and shuffling noises coming from the living room. Since she was rarely home, I assumed she had heard stories from the others and was now just trying to spook me. Basically, I stayed skeptical until it happened to me. It occurred one afternoon, before it even got dark. My roommates were either in class or out, and the front door was locked. I was alone in my room, eating early dinner and video calling my mom. While I was talking about my day, I suddenly heard strange sounds coming from the living room and froze. A faint shuffle, a low, steady, but somehow loud breathing. "Do you hear that?" I asked my mom. I suddenly understood what my roommate must have been talking about. My mom couldn't hear anything on the call and insisted I go check, as it sounded like someone had just opened the fridge. I really didn't want to leave my room. My mom kept telling me not to be ridiculous and to open the door. After some back and forth, I finally got up, slowly opened my door, and peeked into the living room. Suddenly, everything was calm, silent and peaceful. The noise had stopped. Feeling a bit braver, I walked around the apartment, checked all the rooms, and made sure the front door was still locked. Satisfied, I went back to my room and shut the door. I looked at my mom, still on the video call, and it was her expression that scared me more than anything. She calmly said, "So, I guess that wasn't a black-haired roommate who just walked by right into the room." She had seen someone while I had been checking the rooms. I left right away to wait for my roommates outside. Long story short, one of my roommates eventually decided to tell one of our teachers. By then, all of us were on edge. The teacher's response? A deep sigh, as though this wasn't the first time she'd heard something like it. "Oh, some years ago, 4 girls died in a fire in the room directly above yours. Maybe that's why." We looked it up. There are still news articles online about the fire and about their deaths.
When I was 4-ish, my cousin lived out in the country. He lived in a house that used to be an old schoolhouse. There were 3 levels, and on the 3rd level, a teacher had hung himself. I don't know if my aunt and uncle found that out before or after they moved there. Anyway, I was in my cousin's bedroom. He was 6, and looking out the window. My cousin had just walked out to do something. I was staring out the window and saw him at the edge of the cornfield next door, maybe 40 feet from his house. I didn't think to myself, there's no way my cousin made it that far. In 15 seconds, I was young. I saw my cousin waving for me to come. I can still see his striped shirt and curly hair in the edge of the cornfield. I was looking, and I don't recall if I said anything, but he yelled, "Jump! Come on, just jump!" And being little, I thought it was reasonable. I had pulled a chair to the window and had just put the screen up. It was the 70s, and windows didn't have the safety features they do now, lol. Anyway, I was on the chair looking at my cousin and said, "It's too far down." And he said, "It's okay, I do it all the time." I literally had one leg out the window when my actual cousin came back into the room. Turns out he had just gone to the washroom, not the cornfield, and started screaming at me. He yelled, "What are you doing?" I was terrified because I looked back at the cornfield and there was no one there. I tried to argue he was at the cornfield and told me to jump. He went and got his mom, my aunt, and said I was trying to jump out the window. I was horrified. I don't recall my aunt being mad though. She didn't say much, but I remember her asking me intently what I saw. My cousin was mad and kept saying I did not go to the cornfield. My aunt never verified that she believed me but didn't make me feel weird. She just asked things like, was it his actual voice, etc. I have no recollection past this. I don't know if she told my mom, etc. At that age, I had no idea what about anything paranormal or supernatural. Turns out when I was 10, I started having visions and ended up being a medium. I now think that was my first encounter with a spirit. Too bad it was a terrible one that wanted to watch me jump to my death.
Late-ish to the party, but I really want to tell my story because so few people believe me when I tell them. So a couple years ago, I got the chance to visit a very famous haunted establishment in my city that had been open to the public for years, but was now closing due to the owner passing away. A family member had some connections to that family, so we got to have a night there alone, unsupervised. Now I was always skeptical about that place, because they would charge money for those tours and it was very theatrical, almost comical. So I went in without much expectations and as a total disbeliever of the paranormal. However, that night changed my whole entire perspective. For a little bit of backstory, that once was a normal house, a courthouse, and a place for men to escape conscription during the war as well, so it has a lot of different history tied to it. One legend that is said about the courthouse is that the judge that was working there was an awful man who was really abusive towards women, and it's said that he pushes any woman that tries to sit on his chair. Obviously, knowing that, that's the very first thing I did, because I really wanted to experience it. I sat on the chair for 15 to 20 minutes, sort of mocking the judge, taunting him, being audibly disappointed at not being pushed. Seeing that not much was happening at that point, I determined that I was right, and that it was all a bunch of bullshit, so I left the group with a friend to go to the bathroom. As I was in the bathroom, I felt a really warm sensation in my back that quickly grew uncomfortable, so I asked my friend to lift up my shirt to see what was up. She lifts it, and I had 2 huge claw marks going down my back, as if someone scratched the hell out of it. I was 17 at the time, with no partner, no animals, didn't get into any kind of fight, and no one could have logically done that to me. At that point, I'm a bit startled, but I'm trying to convince myself that it could have been something else, trying to find any kind of plausible explanation for it. The group got bored of the courthouse part of the house and wanted to explore the attic. Everyone is absolutely terrified at the simple sight of the attic door. It was a simple door, no different than any other, but for some reason, there was a feeling like if you opened it, something horrible was going to happen. I volunteer to open it and we go in. Upon entering the attic, it looks like a regular attic, pretty cluttered, and full of children and baby stuff. It's also important to note that one of the wall was not a complete wall. The top portion of the wall didn't go up to the ceiling. There was about maybe 10 inches of it gone, sort of like a shelf. So there was space for storage. I'm sorry, English is not my first language. I'm trying my best to describe it well. I don't know how to describe how I felt in that room. It was like the air was thick. Even the most skeptical of us were terrified. One of the first things in front of us was a cradle, and one of us said, "There's 4 more in here, out of nowhere." It was weird because he'd never been there, and we definitely couldn't see 4 more cradles from where we were standing. But after exploring the whole thing, we indeed found 4 more. We were in there for maybe 2 minutes max, with none of us really wanting to speak much, when all of us somehow all decided to take a look at that storage wall, and I swear to everything that is dear to me that we all saw a sort of bald, long-shaped head peek at us from the top, then slowly disappear as it noticed us looking. We ran the fuck away from that place, and that place no longer takes any visitors.
The absolute scariest and craziest thing happened to me when I was 13. The house I grew up in had a lot of paranormal activity, and my whole family had experiences there that made us all uncomfortable. The scariest I experienced was late in the night. My mom was working overnight, and my grandma was sleeping downstairs. Her room was at the bottom of the stairs, my bedroom was upstairs. I was alone up there, aside from our dog. The house is situated in southern New England in a rural area. It was late. I was on my PC with the TV on the other side of the room, and I had forgotten the light on my turtle's tank. Sorry, Saber. Suddenly, my PC, TV, and turtle light went off. Directly to my right, I had a bureau and a mirror hung above it. This mirror had been found in the house when my grandparents had purchased it in the 50s. Anyway, I heard something directly to my right. The arm of the chair was nearly touching the bureau fall and slide. I sat completely paralyzed in fear, too scared to even scream or move in the slightest. A few seconds later, the TV came on and only static showed up on the screen, and loud. The turtle lamp came back on and my PC started making noises. I remember looking to my right first with my eyes and then slowly turning my neck ever so slightly. A perfume bottle of mine had fallen and slid to the edge, basically aligning perfectly with my temple. I screamed and ran out off my room, jumped over the gate at the top of the stairs to keep our dog from going down at night and waking my grandma, and ran into her room at the base of the stairs and grabbing her tightly. I remember crying and holding on to her until the sun came up, and she reassured me it would be okay. Even writing this, I get teary-eyed out of fear because it was horrifying, and I can't describe the dark and heavy presence I felt in that moment.
When I was about 20, my boyfriend and I were renting this terrible attic apartment. My boyfriend was a talented guitarist, and we were night owls, so we were sitting in the tiny kitchen by the window, smoking cigarettes and playing music late into the night. At about midnight or 1, we decided to head to bed. Boyfriend leaned his guitar against the stove, with the strings against the oven handle, and a chair propping the bottom so it wouldn't fall. It was secure, and we went to sleep in the adjacent room. Several hours later, probably 3 to 4 a.m., we woke up to a strange, loud noise, like a crash and sliding. We get up, throw the lights on, grab our home defense stick, fully prepared to whack whatever intruder knocked over the guitar. Only, the apartment was empty. Of course it was. We lived on the 3rd floor. I turn the corner into our living dining room area, and I see the damn guitar, not in the kitchen, where we left it, dragged into the next room, under the dining room table, with a couple chairs in front of it. How? My boyfriend was a true blue skeptic, but that incident was so unexplainable that he asked me to sage the apartment before we went back to bed. We also had a creepy closet that wouldn't stay shut, so maybe the closet ghost didn't like our music.
I've posted this before, but it's definitely the strangest, scariest thing that ever happened to me. Back in 2012, I had stayed up late, laying on the couch, and playing on my phone. I had a fan on for the white noise, and the only light I had on was one over the sink in the kitchen, and that lit up the living room just a little. I eventually fell asleep. I woke up around 2 a.m. and decided to join my husband in bed. I got up, picked up my phone, and walked about 2 feet to turn the fan off. As I turned away from the fan to head to bed, standing in front of me was me. There were no mirrors in the room, and the curtains were pulled, so there was no window reflection. This thing, person, entity, whatever she was wearing exactly what I was wearing, not moving, and just standing there in front of me. The only difference was that the head was bent down, like it was sort of looking at the floor, but not totally bent, and her hair, I had long hair back then, was hanging over her face. Her head was bent down just enough that she could either look through the hair at me or look at the floor. I screamed. My husband yelled from the bedroom asking what was wrong, and as I turned my head to call to him, she disappeared. I wound up telling my husband that I had a nightmare, but I wasn't in any way asleep. I was standing on my feet and had just turned off the fan. I did tell him what happened later, but I was just too freaked out to deal with it right then. I've tried researching what it means to see yourself or your double, but the only thing that I found was called a fetch. It's supposed to be an omen of your upcoming death, but obviously I'm still alive. But 2 weeks later, my mother died unexpectedly from a brain aneurysm. Since then, if I'm in a room by myself, I always have a bright light on. I don't want to take a chance on ever seeing that again. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to enjoy more stories.